Okay, let's go back. The date is July 2nd, 1937. High above the massive, empty Pacific Ocean, a single radio message manages to cut through all the static. It's the voice of Amelia Earhart, probably the most famous pilot on the planet. And then, just like that, the signal is gone. This is the story of that final message, and the really haunting question of what happened after the silence fell.
So, this is it. This is the last confirmed thing we ever heard from Amelia Earhart. And what's so striking about it is that it's not a cry for help. Not at all. Her voice is calm, it's clear, it almost sounds routine. She thinks she's close, flying along a specific line of navigation. This one sentence, it's the last solid piece of the puzzle we have. It's the starting point for one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in history.
To really understand the end of her story, you have to remember why she was out there in the first place. Amelia Earhart wasn't just a pilot, she was a global superstar. And she had one last huge goal in her sights, to become the first woman to fly all the way around the world. She was so close to pulling it off.
But standing between her and the history books was this: 7,000 miles of open Pacific Ocean. And this wasn't just a long flight, it was, by far, the toughest leg of the whole journey. Just an endless expanse of blue with almost nothing to guide you.
And what was she aiming for? Howland Island. I mean, it is hard to explain just how tiny this place is. It's barely 1.5 miles long. People have said that trying to find it from the sky is like trying to find one specific grain of sand on a giant blue carpet. Hitting that target depended completely on perfect navigation and communication. There was no room for error.
So her radio, it was everything. It wasn't just for talking. It was actually a navigational tool. It was supposed to let the Coast Guard ship, the Itasca, which was waiting for her, get a fix on our position and guide her in safely. That radio was meant to be her eyes, her compass, her connection to the world. It was her absolute lifeline.
And that brings us to the final hours of that morning. The sun's coming up, the fuel tanks are getting low, and you can just feel the tension building with every single minute that ticks by. The clock is officially running out. Just look at how fast everything starts to unravel. At 7:42 a.m., she radios the ship. Her voice is still clear. She says she should be right on top of them, but she can't see a thing. Fuel is already a big worry. Then, an hour later, at 8:43, she sends that final, calm message about being on the line. And then, just 2 minutes later, nothing. The line goes completely dead.
And right here, this is the tragic, fatal flaw in this whole situation. The crew on the ship, the Itasca, they could hear her perfectly, but she couldn't hear them, not a thing. They were desperately trying to send messages back, trying to guide her in, but she was flying in complete radio silence, totally unaware that anyone was even hearing her calls.
One of the most chilling parts of this whole mystery is what didn't happen. There was no mayday, no panicked last words, no report of an engine failing or some catastrophic disaster. She didn't just vanish in a fireball.
She just faded away. The radio waves that had carried her voice clear across the ocean were suddenly filled with static. And then, just a deep, total silence. And for the official record, this is where the story ends.
But the story doesn't really end there, because for a lot of people, that silence, well, it wasn't the end at all. It was actually the beginning of a whole new mystery. This is the question, right? This is what has fueled decades of searching, of theories, of debate. The official search pretty much assumes she crashed and sank. But what if that whole assumption is wrong? What if something else happened after her radio went quiet?
Because in the days right after she disappeared, all these reports started trickling in, from radio operators, both amateur and professional, all over the Pacific. And they claimed they were hearing these chilling fragments. A woman's voice. Sometimes it was faint, other times it sounded desperate. They reported hearing calls for help, please. Some even thought they heard coordinates.
Now think about this. If even one of these so-called ghost signals was real, it changes absolutely everything. It would mean the plane didn't just nosedive into the ocean. It suggests she might have landed somewhere, maybe on a remote reef or a tiny island, and that either she or her navigator, Fred Noonan, actually survived.
It just paints this absolutely harrowing picture. Can you imagine surviving a crash landing, only to be stranded with a busted radio, just desperately trying to get a signal out, sending calls for help with no idea if anyone, anywhere, can even hear you?
just broadcasting into the dark. And that gut-wrenching image of a hero, alone, broadcasting into the dark, and no one answering, that's what turned her disappearance from a tragic accident into a search that has never, ever really stopped.
For over 80 years, we've thrown everything we have at this mystery. I mean, deep-sea sonar has scanned the ocean floor. Expeditions have combed remote islands looking for any piece of wreckage or human remains. Analysts have pored over those old radio logs again and again, and still, every single effort ends in the same place. Ambiguity, inconclusive evidence, and just more questions.
So here's the one simple, undeniable fact at the center of all this. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her plane disappeared from the face of the Earth.
And yet, this is the haunting possibility that just refuses to go away. The plane was lost, yes, but her voice carried on those faint, desperate radio waves. It may have lingered for hours, maybe even for days.
It just sends you down this whole path of what-ifs. If she really did survive the landing and was able to transmit, and if those ghost signals were real and people actually heard her, what if for a short time rescue is actually possible?
And if that's true, then the question isn't just what happened to Amelia Earhart. The real, lingering question that sticks with you is a much, much harder one to answer. Did the world hear her final unanswered call, and did we miss our chance to save her?